In today's video, I'm going to be going over how high or low skill I think killers in Dead by Daylight are. I'm going to be this is going to be kind of based off my own opinion, but obviously there are ways to kind of tell how high or low skill a killer is based off how complex their power is and how other people tend to struggle with them. I'm going to go over my tier list real quick, and that would be very high skill. Obviously, they are hard to play. They take a lot of skill to get into. High skill, they just require a large amount of skill to play. Moderate skill, they're kind of average on the skill level. They're not too hard, but not too easy. A bit of skill, they're kind of on the easier side, but you still need to know a bit of tech to kind of get really good with them. And then you have your low skill or basic knowledge. Basically, it's just understand kind of how to play the game, and that's about as far as you need to go with the killer. So first off, I think Trapper is going to go into that category. He's really just by definition, like just a basic knowledge kind of killer. You just run around and trap pallets and windows. That's all you need to do to play him. Of course, once you get higher, you might need to learn how to where like other places to trap, but Trapper at his base is just literally just trap windows and pallets, and that's it. Wraith, I'm gonna put and takes a bit of skill. He's a bit different than Trapper, although he is probably the most basic killer in the game, but his power is a lot more complex than Trapper's, just knowing when to use it and when not to use it, and how to kind of play a stealth killer. You want to try to kind of pressure a bit and kind of spread like injury, like juggle in between survivors and get a lot of injuries so you get that first hit on an injured survivor pretty easily. So I feel like playing like that, it takes a little bit of game knowledge, a little bit of skill, so he gets in that category. Hillbilly, I'm going to put in very high skill. Actually, I'm going to put him in high skill. Hillbilly himself, to be the best Hillbilly, he's probably one of the hardest killers, but it's just like saying Huntress is one of the hardest killers, but she's not, because Hillbilly, he has a very high skill ceiling, but his skill floor is still pretty high, but it's not as hard as some other killers. Right, at its base, it's just learn how to chainsaw, learn how to kind of wrap loops, and that's where it gets kind of hard. It's curving, except you don't need to curve to play Hillbilly. It's not like his skill floor. It's not part of his skill floor. It's part of his skill ceiling. And although it is counted in this a bit, it's just there's so many killers where you can argue at the skill floor they take a lot of at their skill ceiling they take a lot of skill. So I don't want to go into that exactly. So I'm going to put Billy as a high skill. You could argue very high skill, but I feel like at his base he's more simpler than he is at his than he is in other like skill levels. Nurse herself at her base, she is probably the hardest killer, one of the hardest killers in the game. A lot of people seem to struggle with Nurse, especially if they have no experience with her, because she is different than the game itself. You do not play Nurse like you do play a game. You don't run loops like you would a normal killer. You don't chase survivors like you would a normal killer. You just kind of got to learn how to play a separate game, and that game is Nurse. That being said, it is very hard to kind of learn how to play that game if you're not going to pump in hours and hours into the game. Nurse is a pretty high skill killer. I could be biased because I am a Nurse player, but you hear it from everyone. Nurse is the hardest killer in the game. Nurse is, she gets a lot of respect because she's hard to play and hard to learn. So yeah, Michael Myers, I'm going to put him in low skill basic knowledge just because he's just a basic killer with a one shot. The most kind of in-depth thing you need to know about it is literally just stalk survivors to 99 and wait until you get close to them to pop it, and just to not pop on injured survivors. That's it. Hag, I'm gonna put Hag in high skill. There's definitely a bit of knowledge when it comes to playing Hag. You know what? I don't want to see Hag next to Billy. That does make sense. I'll put Billy in very high skill. Hag, there's a lot of skill that comes with Hag. Where to trap, when to trap, like trapping loops too. How you can bait traps at loops to make survivors run away, and that you're not actually trapping it. Or kind of like the pig crouch, and there's just a lot of skill in like reacting instantly to your trap so you can actually get the hit. She's a slower killer too, so you have to kind of play smarter on loops, or else you just get looped crazily. You can't really always commit. So yeah, Doctor, I'm gonna say Doctor takes a moderate amount of skill. Normally you'd say Doctor's kind of a brainless killer, but when you see brainless people playing Doctor, they get like no value just because his shock, I guess, is harder than it looks to hit. There's a range on it which isn't very easy to tell, but it is a very small range at its base, and you have to charge it. So obviously knowing timings, if this static blast is going to make it so the survivor cannot vault the window, or if they'll just vault it anyways, and knowing that you'll just have to take the loop and loop it until you can get to that position where the shock will actually make it so they cannot vault a window or pallet. But other than that, there's not much more to him other than knowing when to static blast and stuff. But yeah, Huntress I'm going to put in as a very high skill killer. Much like Billy, she's not the hardest killer to pick up. You know, at her base, she is pretty simple. Just throw hatchets at survivors, just know how to aim. But that's another thing that is pretty unique in Dead by Daylight is aiming. Most killers do not have to aim. And so having coming to Dead by Daylight from an FPS game might help you out, but many people do not. And so it is hard for many people to play Huntress. That and cross maps and game sense really play a big role into how you can like improve your Huntress. I remember I was playing against someone on Huntress, and they were saying, you know, this Huntress has crazy game sense. She's scary to play against, right? Because if you have good game sense on Huntress, you're going to be able to predict where they are going and throw some nasty hatches at them. And so yeah, that really does play into the role of how high skill Huntress is. Next, Bubba. Bubba takes a bit of skill. He's not brainless like Trapper or Myers, but I feel like he's not that hard either. Bubba is really just rev chainsaw at pallets to just break it. You got to kind of know if you can go for the chainsaw though, because a chainsaw is a commitment, right? You have to charge it up for like 2.5 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, and if a survivor is able to get to a pallet or window before then, you just wasted your time and wasted an injure state. So obviously learning to curve around loops too. It is pretty hard to curve tight, and if you don't curve tight, you're going to be losing a lot of distance, and if you do mess up on a curving tight, you're literally going to lose the chase. So yeah, there's a bit you got to know how to do with Bubba. Freddy, he takes a little bit of skill. I guess I'm going to put him a bit higher because there's a lot of complexity to his kit, just because there's a lot there. Like faking teleports mid-chase to kind of get pressure, teleporting to witch gens, and trapping certain loops and knowing how to use the trap, kind of like a clown bottle. You trap and you run backwards so that survivors are forced to run back into it, or you trap and you predict that the survivor's going to make distance anyways, so you kind of fake the trap or whatever. I don't know. Survivors tend not to commit to loops though against Nightmare if they're smart, because they'll just get hit. They'll just kind of throw down the pallet, so it's tough to rank him. You could just say he just is very easy, which I do agree with, but there is a bit in his kit that if you don't play well, you're not going to really get a lot out of his kit. So next, I'm going to go to Pig. I think Pig does take moderate amount of skill too. I don't think she's as easy as like Wraith or anyone, just because her stealth comes at a big cost to her movement speed, and it actually has complexities at loops, to kind of use the crouch to get hits, or just to use the crouch to bait a survivor to run away from a loop. So say there's a survivor out of loop and you get pallet control, you crouch down, the survivor will probably run away because it's very hard to predict what the pig's going to do there, and they could get hit. So yeah, Clown I'm going to put in low skill basic knowledge of the game. You just kind of got to know that where the survivor's pathing is and how to shut down loops with your bottles, and that's basically it, right? Clown's a pretty simple killer. You could maybe argue he takes a bit of skill because you got to aim the bottles, you got to like kind of learn how to corral the bottles, and plus there's the complexity between the two bottles that he has, when to use them and when not to. So yeah, I'll put him actually there. Spirit I think is a high skill killer. A lot of people are just like, if you have headphones you win, but that's not really the case. Hitting survivors that are healthy can be tough because they make very little sound, and if they're not just going to hold W and try to mind game you, it's tough. Spirit takes a lot of game sense to play her really well, and if you don't have game sense, you're just gonna get like mind gamed every time you go into phase. So that is definitely why I would rank Spirit higher on the list, is because she is just immense game sense, and she's also a slower killer too. So playing her and constantly killing, I don't know what I was saying there, and trying to loop her too can be very disadvantageous. So you really have to rely on how well you use your power, which killers that are very dependent on their power oftentimes tend to be more skillful, such as Blight, Huntress, Nurse, Spirit, as I ranked her up there. So yeah, Legion is a low skill kind of basic knowledge killer. There's not much to him. You see a healthy survivor, you Feral Frenzy, you stab them, you go to the next survivor, you stab them, and then once you get everyone injured, you just are a basic killer, just hitting down one-shotted survivors. Yeah. So Plague, I'm going to say, is a high skill killer as well. She has the kind of She kind of has a different playstyle than you'd expect. At the start of the game, you don't really want to commit to any chases. You just want to puke on a survivor and go find other survivors. Just puke on them until everyone's sick, and then you want to take your corrupt purge. By the time you have like a hook, you get a hook, you take the corrupt purge, and then you kind of stay kind of close to your 3rd-gen, and while kind of keeping an eye on the survivor on the hook to get immense pressure, really, because nobody really wants to trade with a corrupt plague because it's just so tough, right? And so knowing when to pop your power and knowing how, kind of her playstyle at the start of the game and being to aim the vomit can be tough sometimes, right? The vomit is a slow-moving projectile, so you can't just fire it around every corner like you can a hatchet, right? You got to learn how to lead it, and you got to learn the distances, right? Like they're gonna round that corner, I can't shoot that, or like I'm gonna round this corner, so it's gonna be hard to actually kind of hit them with the same projectile. I don't know. Ghostface is a I feel like Ghostface is just a little bit more complex fighter. You just have to learn to keep everyone on 99 instead and kind of use his crouch mechanics smartly and know when to pop your stealth. But other than that, he's a pretty easy killer as well. Just literally learn how to stealth and kind of 99ing survivors much like Myers, but yeah, it's a little bit more to remember. Next, Demogorgon. I'm going to say Demogorgon takes a little bit of skill, like a moderate amount of skill actually. And that is because portal placements, a lot of noob Demogorgons will kind of forget about the portals and just kind of resort to shred. And his portals can be pretty good, but not just that, it's also knowing kind of how to shred and when to shred. A lot of the times, shredding can be a waste of time. Like if you shred around every corner, you're just kind of slowing yourself down slightly, and if you miss, you're giving survivors so much distance. So you want to be very careful with your shreds and make sure that you're using it to break pallets and get confirmable hits, not just using it out and about for every like chance you get to a hit. Because yeah, it's not as easy to hit as a basic lunge, right? Like you have no control once it's launched. Oni, I would say Oni is I guess it's rough. I'll say he's a high skill killer too. You have to learn how to kind of manage your blood, like get hits and kind of juice the survivor until you get your power. And then in your power, you kind of have to learn how to, you gotta know how to steer and to kind of predict survivors. But I don't think he's super high on the high skill. I think Spirit is like the more skillful out of the Yamokas just because she takes a lot more game sense. Oni's kind of like an easier hillbilly, and his power is just, it's not very hard to miss, and it's just got a massive hitbox too, not to mention. But yeah, Oni's not a hard killer, not an easy killer, but I wouldn't say he's like a super hard killer either. You just kind of gotta learn how to mind game survivors, kind of bait out certain movements from them that you wouldn't expect. Deathlinger, I'd say Deathlinger is a pretty high skill killer. A lot of people like to say he's just kind of point and click, but ever since the nerf, survivors do have time to kind of react to a shot, so you have to have really good aim and really good shot leading because the shot isn't instant. In order to hit survivors, especially from far away, you also have to realize that not every shot is worth it because survivors will just be able to break free. So you got to know that you can't just go for every shot, or else you're just wasting your time. So there's the game sense knowledge of it, the fact that he also has such a massive terror radius that alerts survivors your way. You got to you kind of have to rely on like building up pressure because survivors tend to know you're coming. I don't know, it's rough, but Executioner, I think Executioner is probably on the highest skill side of this. I believe that he takes a lot of game sense to hit his shots through walls. Predicting survivors and leading your shots is always tough. Also, where to leave your trails at, just because trails are pretty important to get on survivors. There's not a whole lot to talk about, but you don't really see many executioners for a reason because his power kind of feels clunky if you're not used to it. So yeah. Moving on, the Blight. The Blight is another high skill killer. I think he's kind of like Hillbilly kind of in a way, except his power is more complex because you have to learn about all the little you can learn about all the little kind of slide text and stuff. I'm not a Blight main, but I can play the Blight. I don't really know the slide text other than on auto haven records like the cars and stuff, but I can tell you that knowing that stuff will make you a much better Blight. I can also tell you that there's a lot of things that I did before I actually was taught how to play Blight that I just can't believe I did before, and things that I didn't do that I can't believe I didn't do on Blight. So there's a lot of things that you can learn on Blight, and if you like practice him a lot, you'll learn that you don't really know as much as you thought you did every day. Like there's a lot that you can learn with him. So yeah, the twins, I'd say they're a pretty high skill killer too. It's really rough to play them right because you don't play them like a normal killer, much like Nurse or Spirit. They have a different play style, and if you play their power normally, like a normal killer, you will literally lose every single game. Victor is not your power. Victor is not like Victor is not the power that you use to confirm downs in a chase. Victor is the power you use for recon, for camping, and for slugging the entire team. So yeah, it's also very hard to play the twins into coordinated survivors, so it takes a lot of skill to do that. Trickster is just moderate skill. I would say you have to learn how to aim with him, but you really don't. You just have to learn how to press buttons a lot of the M1 and kind of just spam. Although there is a little bit of tech you can learn at like Shack and stuff where you thread through the holes, and that is mainly why I'm boosting him up. Because otherwise, I think he's a pretty easy killer to play. You just kind of spam knives at them any chance you can get, and you'll get it down. But the fact that you do have to aim a bit, and the fact that there are little techs you can learn with him, like hole techs or whatever, it does make him a bit more skillful. Nemesis, I'm gonna put him in like higher on the moderate skill. His whip takes a little bit of precision, and you have to. I don't know. Is he that hard? I don't know. His whip takes a bit of precision. Corralling survivors into your zombies kind of can take skill. Knowing when to kill zombies so they get better spawn places can be skillful. But he's not super high skillful, which is why I put him kind of middle of the pack. Because he's not like easy to play, but he's not very hard either. Cenobite, I'm gonna put him in high skill too. He is very high skill. Like he's a very high skilled killer. His chain is very, very, very like tedious to use. It has like very little turn rate once you click the initial button, and you basically have to lead the survivor because the hitbox is super small. It's not like a hatchet hitbox. You're literally using a needle. So yeah, just because of that, I would say he's a pretty skillful killer. Additionally, you have like the gameplay around like the box and knowing to kind of pressure survivors during that time, especially when they're all going to be chained, and not to let survivors get to the box. Of course, if you the pinhead doesn't really know where the box is, but kind of pressuring survivors, so getting the box as an inconvenience is really good for him because it just allows him to build up immense pressure. Moving on, the artist I'm going to say is probably one of the highest skillful killers in the high skill tier list. You might even argue that she's like up here. I might argue that she's very high skillful, just because there are so many things you can do with her, like that are super super skillful and just take a crap ton of game sense. Like learning to literally, I like when I play pubs, I've learned how to like down survivors while I'm in a chase with another survivor. Doesn't happen very often, but I can normally pull it off every game or so. And just learning to pressure other survivors while in a chase with that survivor, much like a Huntress, but you just do it so much better because with every crow you throw at that one survivor, you can throw two at other survivors. So that's very skillful too, learning how to do that. She takes a lot of multitasking, so yeah, that's pretty good. And learning how to use your crows to kind of block off and corral survivors. Shutting off exits by pointing a crow towards it. The survivors are going to try to like run towards it and bait the crow from you. So just learning kind of to be patient with your crows too. There's a lot about the artist that I think is very high skillful, and that's why I think she really appealed to me because I like playing your high skill killers. Like I've always enjoyed playing Nurse, Huntress. I enjoyed playing Spirit when she came out, but I don't really enjoy playing the brainless killers like Trapper, Myers, Legion. I don't even have like Myers or Ghostface just because I feel like they're too easy and their power is boring, right? But artist, I feel like her power is very complex and there's a lot to it, so I will put her at very high skill. She has such a high skill ceiling too, so yeah. The Onryo, I'm gonna put her probably above Nemesis, just because her power is a lot more complex than most other stealth killers too. You're not very often using her stealth in the way that you would other killers too, because you don't get like a big movement speed advantage for it, and most of the time survivors will see you coming anyways. Although you can use the stealth, but it makes getting that first hit harder than it should be. Her TVs are very good at getting around, but unfortunately they're not placed where she always wants them to be. So learning how to use the correct TVs and how to juggle, kind of hit a survivor and they get their massive sprint burst and get into good space, then you TP to a different survivor and kind of just try to get everyone injured and maintain that pressure. Only problem with her is that the TVs aren't always, like, the TVs take so long to come back. So yeah, the Dredge, I'm gonna say he's a pretty high in the moderate skill tier 2. Learning how to use your Remnant is pretty good. Is kind of skillful. The locker TP is pretty skillful too. You gotta learn how to kind of chain lockers for the best info places to TP to in your locker. But really, a lot of it comes to using the Revenant to your advantage. A lot of times, survivors will try to just run straight into it to deactivate it, is what I've learned. So you don't want to bait it like you would a Artist Crow, where you just hold it out and let it pressure the survivor. But at the same time, sometimes survivors will bait it. So there's a lot of mind play and trying to identify how the survivor will play. So yeah, the last killer, and this is Albert Wesker. I want to say he is it's really rough because when I did play him, which I didn't post any gameplay of me playing him, but I did play him, he did feel very clunky, and that is a problem. But I feel like if they fix it, he'll probably be a pretty high middle of the pack skill killer, just because there's not much complexity to his power other than you dash and then you get to dash again. Hitting survivors will dashing into a survivor will pick them up, and if you're near anything, he'll throw them at it and they'll get injured. But other than that, there's nothing super complex about his power. Yeah, but of course, learning to control his dash and the distance of it, and then how to chain the dash like a Nurse Blink is very, very skillful in its own way. So yeah, I hope you liked my tier list. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.